Okay, so then we'll just go ahead and get started then. Once again, we are here November 7, 2024 for our CCIM chat for the 2024 CCIM Illinois Mentorship Cohort. And we have our very esteemed guest, Andie Edmonds, who is the first VP for CCIM Institute. I'll read just a brief synopsis of her bio. She's worked for corporations, succeeded as a commercial real estate broker, started and grown her own business, and developed and managed salespeople and support staff. Throughout her career, she has earned a professional reputation as a resourceful, thoughtful, and well-spoken problem solver who cares deeply for the people with whom she works. Investment real estate has been a part of her livelihood since 1994. She's an experienced investor, tenant, landlord, and broker reps, and she was a stockbroker in the 90s before moving to a small city in Central Oregon where she wanted to reboot her career after all of her kids were in school. Managing the operations of her small business as a player coach was a master class in prioritizing perseverance and making tough decisions, Andie has said. She has consistent success in developing, mentoring, and managing brokers through improving her capacity to be approachable, diplomatic, and patient. That sounds like all of the ingredients to a very well-rounded, sane individual. Welcome, Andie. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. The way that we've kind of worked this is if people have questions, they pop it in the chat. Cynthia will go in and grab all those questions, so you don't need to worry about minding that. You can move into some of the talking points that you were sent ahead of time, or if you just wanted to kind of get right into sharing your experience becoming a CCIM and why you decided to do so, you can take that route as well. So as we proceed through the day, we'll kind of fill in those quiet fillers with some of those questions that are in that briefing that you got.
Great. Yeah. So why don't I start with kind of how I got introduced to CCIM and that journey. I started in commercial real estate in 2008 formally as a broker. Prior to that, I had, while my children were young, I started flipping houses. I kept some as rentals, and basically that introduced me to the idea of real estate as an investment as opposed to just a place to live. And as the kids got older and started going to school and I started wanting to talk to other adults more often, I took the opportunity to sort of think about what career I might want to pursue. As it was mentioned, I was a stockbroker, kind of my first career out of college, and did that for a number of years. I'm a finance major, so that type of business has always been really interesting to me, and made a connection with a gentleman who owned a small local commercial brokerage in Bend, Oregon, and talked to him about what's it mean to be a broker and what does that look like. I knew very definitively I did not want to be a residential broker. Despite having flipped houses, I really saw real estate as an investment. And while I have developed patience along the line, at that point, I certainly did not have the patience to try to manage people who were like, oh, I can't imagine owning this house because it's an ugly chandelier. And, I'm in my mind, I've remodeled the entire house and I know what it should look like. So I recognized that my strength was going to be more in focusing on the investment part of things. And this gentleman said, yep, we'll bring you on and this is how it's going to work. And he said, I only have one requirement. You have to pursue your CCIM designation. And I was like, great, no idea what that is, but sure, I'll do it. And he was a CCIM designee. And so I started getting involved. I actually, kind of funny little fact, I took CCI 101 before I had even passed my real estate exam. I had been studying for my real estate exam, but the timing of it was such that I could take this 101 class because it was at a very convenient location for me. And then I came back and took my real estate test exam, which I passed both of them. But that was what kind of got me kicked off, and really loved the fact that I got to use all my experience with numbers and that type of thing. And so I did that for a while with this one firm. And then I went out and started my own firm, became part of the NAI Global Network, did that for a number of years until 2020, or at the end of 2020, my husband had a job offer in Arizona. So we decided that'd be a great place to go, and did. And I took a little time off, but then started working back again with NAI Horizon here in Phoenix, and have continued to be involved. I was very involved with the Oregon chapter, talking a little bit more about kind of local presence. I really found that even though I had to make a 3-hour drive each way to our meetings, which were held in Portland, Bend is in Central Oregon, and I found that the networking was so powerful, and the education of just what's going on in different markets and how people approach things in different ways was really, really helpful to growing my career. And so I got more involved, got on the board, served as president. In that time, as an officer, you start getting a little more involved with the Institute in terms of coming into the governance meetings, chapter officer training, and those types of things. And that got me very curious about what that sort of commitment looked like. And so I started serving on committees, served on various different PEGs, including one that was related specifically to DE&I initiatives for CCIM Institute and for the CCIM Foundation, and having additional scholarships available for those that are underrepresented in commercial real estate. And so just kind of kept going on that path. And this past October, I was elected to be the first vice president of CCIM Institute, which technically begins the 1st of January of 2025. And then I will go from that to president-elect in 2026. And then I will be the 5th female president of the CCIM Institute in 2027. So pretty excited about that.
Well, kudos to you, and what an accolade to end off on. That is all. I mean, the journey in and of itself, just listening to it, it's almost as if everything was lined up for you. I mean, in the fact that you took the first core course before even become licensed. I mean, come on, Andie. I mean, I love it. I'm still
well, it's your second career and you're getting old, time's a ticking.
Time's a ticking. You're getting it out the way. I'm telling you. I love it. And congratulations to you on your soon-to-be presidencyship. I mean, this is really amazing, and really, especially, from a woman's perspective, it's great to see, our women in these positions and in these roles, which kind of leads me to my next question. What is a challenge that you overcame specifically as being a woman, if there were any that you felt you needed to overcome? What were some that you can kind of share with us?
Yeah, I think so. I think I have kind of a interesting perspective on this. So partly because my first real career out of college was being a stockbroker, and that was in the 90s, early 90s, like 91, I think was my first year. And it was beyond male dominated at that point. I was in an office. I worked in Seattle at that time, so I was in a really large Shearson Lehman Hutton office, and I think I was one of 3 women in the office. And I think we took up 2 floors of a big high rise. I couldn't tell you how many people we had in that office, but mostly men, and support staff, of course, was female. And so I learned at that point, I think one of my big takeaways was, originally I worked really hard to kind of conform to male behavior, how I presented myself, trying to be more assertive. As a lot of women know, there's always that very fine line that we walk between being assertive and being considered something less kind than the word assertive. And so I started to navigate that. And within that time, there were a few women that I could look at and go, gosh, these women have been in this business for, quite a while. They're showing success. They're behaving in a way that seems very authentic. And that was sort of just sort of a note that I took and I tucked away. And then when I stepped away from the work world to stay home with kids, I have 3 children, all adults now. My youngest is a junior at Baylor University. But when I went back to work, I think I had 2 advantages. One, I was in a really small town in Oregon, and the MSA, I use that term very loosely, was about 250,000 people. And outside of that population of 250,000, you'd have to drive 2 more hours before you would find any additional population. So we were a little bit of an island in the middle of the state. And I think there was just a lot more, I don't know if there was more acceptance or less concern about whether I was male or female. But in either case, that I think that worked a little bit to my advantage. And then what I started to recognize, I think with just sort of maturity and getting past a point of being a 20-something and, you know, really wanting to prove myself and not maybe having as much confidence about my skill set as I got into the career in commercial real estate, and I was in my 40s at that point. I recognized that it's there's no reason to be anything but authentic, because I had no fear about a lack of opportunity. I think there's always opportunity for those who are willing to work hard. And what I recognized is that to the same extent, there might be somebody thinking, oh, I don't want to work with her because she's a woman. There's an equal number of people who are saying, I don't want to work with him because he's too young. I don't want to work with her because she's too old. I don't want to work with, you know, so-and-so because they root for the wrong football team. I don't know, you know, whatever. There's always biases, right? And the one bias that's really hard to overcome is people's bias for excellence, right? So they want somebody who can do what they need them to do, what they're being hired to do really, really well. So my focus became, I'm going to be excellent at what I do. I'm going to be reliable, and I'm going to seek out people who want and appreciate that, and I'm going to develop trust. And if someone decides that they don't want to work with me because I'm female, that I just took it as their loss, because I'm really good at what I do. And it was that simple. And so it, I think it took a little bit of courage to do that, in that I wasn't truly convinced I was that excellent at what I do. But it's really a point where the CCIM designation came in and made it easier for me to stand on that. So I mentioned I started that in 2008. I was pinned in 2011. So it took me about 3 years to get through the coursework, have a big enough portfolio to submit, et cetera. But especially once I had that, the credibility that it gave me in my own mind, maybe even more than I do think that people who know about the designation do find that it's a very credible designation, and it means something. But the fact that it gave me the self-confidence to represent that, yeah, I know what I'm talking about. I'm very proud of the fact that I missed 1 question on the final for my pin on the final exam that you have to take. Super proud of that. Like, but it just helped me say, yeah, I do know what I'm talking about. And I am, and while I am good at the numbers and doing the different things, I'm also really excellent at taking care of people. And I just decided to let that stand on its own. And again, you don't like the fact that I'm female, there's a whole bunch of male brokers for you to choose from. Good luck. You won't get the same service. And I just kind of took it that way, instead of trying to, when I had my brokerage, I'll back up just a little. When I had my brokerage in Bend, I ended up, we had 10 brokers at one point, and 6 of them were women, counting myself. So we were a female dominated commercial brokerage, which was unheard of. And the people would say, oh, well, were you seeking out women? No, I wasn't seeking out women. I was seeking out excellent salespeople who were skilled in the understanding of commercial real estate, and they happened to be women. I also will say, I think the women sought me out because how I think it's enticing to look to work for somebody who understands what it's like to be in your shoes, right? Whether that's somebody, another person who's female, whether that's somebody who is, you know, the same race that you are, et cetera, there's a draw to that. But as these women came on, I would hear some comments like, oh, well, that broker didn't do X or didn't get me whatever because I'm a woman. Maybe, but you don't know that for sure. Maybe they're just lazy and they don't give anybody return phone calls. I don't know. But trying to recommend and to evaluate what's the story? Like, does that have to be your story that it's because you're a woman that this doesn't occur, or that you're not given a certain opportunity? Or is that just, you know, the story that you tell yourself and you rely on that? So I asked them to think about setting that aside and think why else they might not be returning your call or whatever. You know, there's potentially other reasons for that. And again, it goes back to the fact that it's very hard to dispute excellence. So focusing on that is really kind of what I've tried to do, and not worry too much about the fact that I like to wear dresses and skirts.
I
Which
so
I do.
that you circled back to the value, because that's what it sounds like. Not only you started with, but that you stood on from even prior to being required to take, you know, to get the CCIM pin, right, from your first boss. It was, I need you to get this, right? So he understood the value of the pin. You understood your very own value. And then when you add that and connect that to the pin, I mean, you're out here being dangerous, girl. That's all I got to say. Being dangerous. And some of those challenges, us, you know, as women, us minorities, we face those on a regular basis. And sometimes we might think, like you said, it's just because we're wearing the skirt. Well, you actually have to show up in your value as well. You have to understand, and like you said, know what you're talking about, right? And I do believe that CCIM is a pathway forward to helping build that confidence into commercial practitioners, and namely women, which is one of the reasons that I was adamant about our chapter having a mentorship program, and our leaders at the time were on board with making sure that we were able to exude the professionalism to individuals not only new to commercial, but you're already in commercial, yet you're having some of these value challenges, is what I like to call them, right? And CCIM just kind of gives you that leaping board to stand in some of those rooms and be acknowledged as one of those professionals equally. So thank you for showing it in that way. Absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely. Do you have any tips? So from your commercial real estate experience, any tips or resources in your arsenal that might make the journey of commercial real estate for some of us a little more navigatable?
Yeah. Probably the one thing I focus on most, and this became an overriding value and part of our culture when I had my office in Oregon, and that was we sort of talked about passion fosters happiness, happiness inspires success. So what is it that I do that when my feet hit the floor in the morning, I'm so excited that I can't wait to get to the office, right? And there's a tendency in this very traditional industry that we work in to want to say, well, this is how it's always been done, or it can't be done this way, or whatever that might be. And what I was finding was I was hearing that quite a bit. Some from inside my the first office that I worked at, and then just sort of from the general CRE community of, you know, you can only do it by making 100 phone calls a day, and you have to go drive the neighborhoods, and you have to know the inventory, and you have to know, you know, all of the different tenants, and, you know, data, which is a fair part of it, absolutely. But if even though there are all these things that you should do that imply that you should have success, if you're not doing it in a way that is making you happy, that happiness that will inspire that success is not going to come, right? So the passion, the idea of I'm putting my feet on the floor and I can't wait to get to the office is what I generally try and talk to people about, whether that was when I had brokers working for me or some of the mentees that I've had over the course of the years, in talking to them about that is like, what makes you most passionate about commercial real estate? Why did you get into it? What is it that you love about it? And if those questions become difficult to answer, then that doesn't mean that you have to leave commercial real estate or leave brokering or whatever it might be, but it means that you maybe need to think about identifying truly what that is instead of sort of going through the motions. I show up, I make phone calls, I research on CoStar, I do whatever it is. And the example that I'll give you from myself is that, again, in this tiny little town, and I started to find that I really liked industrial, right? So when you first start out, I think for most of us, we all kind of just do whatever's handed to what either is handed to us because someone is bringing us in on a deal, or it drops in our lap, or we stumble on it from making, those first few phone calls or whatever it is. And you're like, oh my gosh, a 500 square foot lease for office. This is fantastic. I'm so excited. And so you go out and you do it. But as I was doing it, I was finding two things. One, I really disliked retail. Primarily because where I lived, it was all sort of ma and pa type retail. I probably would feel different if I had been doing like, national tenant rep or something, but I did not like retail in my market. And I really liked industrial in my market. However, in my market, there was a total of 6 million square feet of industrial. Now, I know not maybe all of you are in Chicago, but there's like probably 3 blocks in Chicago that have 6 million square feet of industrial, right? If you go into the right part of Chicago. So I knew that the mathematics of it was I could not make a living doing industrial, but I was really passionate about it, right? It was what I got really excited about. If I had an industrial deal on my plate, or I'm touring an industrial user or a buyer, or going after an industrial listing, that was when I was happiest. Like that, I started to identify that was what was really exciting to me. So then I was like, okay, well, how do I do more of this when there's not more of it to be had, right, in my market? And so then I got into thinking about, well, do I really have geographic constraints? Because yes, I'm licensed in the state of Oregon at that time. I'm licensed there still, and now in Arizona, but I have this amazing network with CCIM, and I have this amazing network with NAI Global, right? So I've got offices all over the place. I've got a list of CCIMs that I can call. And I was just starting to get more involved at the national level with CCIM. And I was finding that networking at the national level was actually starting to really, really promote the idea that maybe I could be doing some industrial deals outside of my market. And so there's sort of a question of like, well, how does that look, and how do you trample on somebody else's market? And why wouldn't the CCIM or the NAI Global office in that market be the person that they would work with? But what I found through just this sort of a happenstance was I ended up meeting this gentleman who lived in New York, and he had a real estate investment firm. And I met him through a friend. We got talking. He was talking about how their company is really interested in industrial, but they want to be in the Southeast. So they want to be in North Carolina, South Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, sort of Northern Florida area. And I said, oh, okay, well, like, who are you working with? What do you do? And I was very exploratory. I did not come into that conversation thinking, oh, here's an opportunity for me to do business, but again, passionate about industrial. So I wanted to talk about it and learn more, and I think probably what I was thinking is, well, how do I find a guy like this guy that's in New York over in Oregon, right? Or something. But he was talking and he said, oh, I work with, you know, Cushwake, CB, JLL. And I was like, oh, he works with all the big firms. So maybe I, you know, but NAI is a big firm and we have, you know, really talented people. And NAI Global, by the way, has the most CCIMs of any brokerage in the country. So that's, I think, kind of a neat little thing. But I was just like, well, so I'm curious, you haven't mentioned NAI. I know we have these really good NAI offices in the Southeast. They're very strong offices there. And I said, is there a reason for that? And he said, no, just, I don't know, just haven't connected with them, haven't seen a property that we liked from them, whatever. And I said, okay. And I said, but if I, you know, found you somebody or found a connection for you at these offices, would, oh, he's like, yeah, I'm a buyer. Give me, you know, you know what, buyers are very, non-selective about who they just want a deal, right? So I kind of noodled on that and I didn't know exactly what that was going to turn into, but I started making some calls to CCIMs that I knew in that area, some NAI offices that I knew, and started looking around. And the end of the day, this was over the course of probably a year and a half, we ended up closing a deal in Charleston, South Carolina for $42 million. Now, you don't get 3% on $42 million deals. My mother thought that I did, so she was quite excited about it. And I had to explain to her, that's not how that works, Mom. Thanks, though. And so, but and then we ended up doing some additional deals. But what it opened up to me, and the idea that I'm trying to get across, is that it was what I was passionate about and I wanted to work on it and I wanted to talk about industrial. So that's what I did. And every morning I was excited to come in and try and talk to somebody new in the Southeast that did industrial and figure out what I could. I invested into my business by making some trips out there and meeting with people face to face. You know, I think it's really important to, I'm going to segue just a second. I'm going to come back to this. I think it's incredibly important that in order to be a successful commercial real estate broker, no matter who you work for, big firm, little firm, whatever, is you have to look at it as your own business and you have to invest in your business. You just have to. The fact that people get worked up about spending 700 or it's more now, our dues are going up, sorry, into their CCIM dues every year, and there's a lot of like, oh, it's, you know, it's too much. Right now we're suggesting that people pay less than $100 a month to maintain their designation and to have the network both locally within their chapter and nationally if they choose to go that route. And you get site to do business and, you know, all of these different things, and people complain about it. And all I can think is, but this is your business. You're investing in your business. And if you truly do not find value in having your CCIM designation and maintaining that by paying your dues, then fine. You know, don't have your designation go. We're not the right organization for you. We're not for everybody. And that's totally fine. But it's the idea of investing in your business. And so that's what I was doing by, you know, paying for some flights and traveling out to see people and going to New York and making sure I met the rest of the people in this guy's office and understanding what they wanted and doing the things that other brokers would not do so that I could go do industrial because that's what I love to do. So, and I cooperated with the brokers in that market. They made good money. I made good money. It was all a very happy deal. I managed the buyer really well, and investment firms are horrible to manage because they have zero loyalty and, you know, they just want the deal, right? So doing that and herding the cats, as I like to say, was a way for me to focus on my passion. It made me happy. My happiness made me good at what I was doing. People saw that and I made money. Like that's just, you know, and to be clear, you know, I talk about success and I focused on dollars there for a while. I don't think anybody's doing this for the, like, you know, the just pure joy of doing real estate. We want to make money. I would stay at home and, you know, be with my kids or, you know, maybe someday grandbabies. Let's all pray for that. And then, but there is the monetary part of it, but there is also, for me, success came from the brain stimulation and the proof that I could help put together difficult deals. I could unearth a deal. This was not a listed deal on this particular example that I gave. So this was something that with the help of the Charleston office, we were able to, unearth an off-market deal and make it come together. It was super complicated and there was lots of hiccups along the way, but we got there. And so that is also a measure of my success of being able to do that and utilize the skill set that I have in a productive way and to, help solve a problem. So that tip, I guess, kind of probably a little bit longer story than I needed, sorry, to give an illustration of, that passion is what creates that, right? And I'm sure my tone and the way I talk about it, you can see that is really what drives me. And so, yeah, I'm happy to get up every morning and get into the office and do my thing. And I think in order to do that, the tip that I'll add on to that is you have to be very clear about what your passion is, right? You have to have a lot of clarity about it. And it doesn't have to be, I've worked with a couple mentees that I would kind of say, hey, when we meet next time, come back and tell me what makes you passionate and what you do. And they'd come back and there'd be all these fluffy words and, it was before Chat GPT in this particular case. So I don't think they, it was just what they thought they needed to do was to put in all these like multi-syllable words and make it sound all fluffy and whatever. But I said, what I asked them to then do is say, okay, you're on an airplane, you're sitting next to somebody and somebody says, what do you do? I said, are you really going to regurgitate that? Like, how are you going to say that? And so so I said, here's my example. I make commercial buildings more valuable and I sell them. That's what I do. Right? So that value in terms of what I do is I make sure that we are optimizing what exists in that building. Have we taken all of the tenants and optimized their leases before we go to list it? Or have we done what is the word that I'm looking for? Oh my gosh, cost segregation. Has there been a cost seg done on it? Are we gonna, if I'm on the buyer side, what is a cost seg gonna potentially look like in terms of improving the value of the property? There's all these different kind of litany of things that you can do that create more value. And sometimes it's a little bit more, not maybe directly numbers oriented, like improving the leases so that your NOI is better, but maybe it's just something as simple as, suggesting to your owner that he spend $1,000 and improve the landscaping out front, or to, restripe the parking lot, or, those types of things. So that's what I try and get across to people is I'm going to come in here, I'm going to figure out how to optimize the value of this building, and then we're going to sell it. Simple. Not that I have this, expounding that I'm going to, create the most optimistic and highly valued, blah, 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 blah. That sounds like it comes out of Chat GPT, right? Which, by the way, I love, and everybody should utilize Chat GPT in the right ways. But, people don't, and I will say, I think a little bit more in the industrial world, people don't talk like that, right? That's not what we're dealing with. So, but I'm very clear about it, right? So that's the point of, to really understand what you're passionate about, you have to be really clear about what it is that makes you passionate. And sometimes you have to bat that around a little bit. And in fact, just this last week, I've been sort of reviewing, I guess, really to start just reviewing, like, what is it that I'm excited about? What makes me want to get out of bed every morning? And, there's a new opportunity I see in industrial that's with what I call shallow bay industrial, or people call shallow bay industrial. And it's basically the industrial business parks, right? So it's a business park full of 3,000 to 5,000 square foot units, and they're, you know, leased to the plumber and the HVAC guy and the, you know, CrossFit gym and all of those types of things. But that's not what the development focus has been on lately. You know, development focus has been on a lot of our distribution, warehousing, last mile. These are really big buildings that are meant for a single tenant. And so now all of our trade guys are running out of places to go because a lot of these places are starting to run down, and they don't mind. A lot of them don't care. They just want to be able to park their trucks and put their pipes and, you know, wires and whatever it is that they put in there. But there's less and less of those because some of those are getting torn down to build, you know, 1,000,000 square foot Amazon deals. So, Jim, is that what you're doing? That's so cool.
Jim, why did I not know that?
So you got to talk about it. That's the other thing. Talk about it.
Yeah,
Come to the chat and tell us.
I say industrial, everybody knows I'm like the industrial Illinois CCIM, I think. But yeah, that small bay, the firm I work for actually developed a lot of that stuff in the 70s.
Yeah.
And was like a pioneer around Chicago and getting that approved and built. And that's been my bread and butter for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, so doing it on the acquisition side and the brokerage side has been, you know, kind of my whole career.
And for those who don't know, Jim Conrad is our past president for CCIM Illinois. So thank you so much for showing up, Jim, and sharing that you are the industrial CCIM king around here in Illinois. So now we know. Now we know.
Yeah. Now you know who to go to. But so he makes a point. It's really good, and I'll make this for besides Jim.
And sorry.
Oh,
Rayu Patel is our president-elect for CCIM Illinois. He is here.
Okay.
Well, Andie.
Okay. So you need to put your CCIM letters behind your name like Jim has, and I have. All y'all. So the question I was going to ask is, you know, is everybody a CCIM on the call? And the reason that I ask that is because it is something that you should definitely take advantage of, and make sure you point that out and you know, sort of, I'll say, market it a little bit. But the I guess the bigger point is in talking about what you do. And, you know, again, trying to keep that simple, but as you get into a conversation, right, and you haven't exhausted somebody with big fancy words and they want to know more, like that answer that I give about, you know, I make commercial buildings more valuable and I sell them, always generates a conversation. Because people are like, oh, really? Like, what does that mean? You know, so look for those ways to generate that conversation. But then I'm going to get into the fact that I'm looking for those small bay, shallow bay industrial properties. And what I learned early on is, and it's law of attraction, right? I think we're all kind of familiar with that concept. But when I was new in the business and I would talk to somebody about, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I do anything. What do you want me to do? You know, like, I'll sell it, I'll buy it, I'll lease it. And then when I was talking to and developing my network with title companies and lenders and, you know, attorneys and all of those types of people, and I said that, guess what I got? A whole bunch of stuff that I wasn't passionate about, right? And it was the little stuff, and it was the 500 square foot, you know, office lease, and the, you know, the stuff that's a grind. And again, not my passion. There's a business to be had in doing, you know, the ma and pa retail and all of that sort of stuff, but it wasn't what I was passionate about. As soon as I started talking about exactly what I wanted to be doing, it didn't matter if I had only done, you know, one of what I wanted to do, it was what I wanted to do. And then, so somebody would say, what do you do? Or what kind of commercial real estate do you do? I was very specific. I do industrial acquisitions and dispositions, sales, you know, and guess what kind of leads I would get? I got leads for industrial sales and acquisitions, you know, so it's put it out there. Like I love The Secret. I love the book, all of that. But I'm telling you, that stuff is real. Like, put it out into the universe. You can't, if you sit there and say, oh, I'll do whatever, well, then you'll do whatever. That's what's going to come to you, is whatever. So anyway, that is, you know, having that clarity, being able to say it simply, being able to engage in a conversation is becomes so easy because you're passionate about it. And then people pick up on that. That helps to develop trust. That helps to develop relationship. You know, those are the things that kind of keep you going. And it's not to say that there aren't, like, I've had terrible years where I'm like, oh, my CPA is going to be like, why are you doing this business? And then I've had years where it's, you know, been like beyond my wildest dreams. So that's just the nature of our business, right? Like, it's just, it ebbs and flows, and you do what you can with it. So.
And you've unpacked your quote so well. You've answered my question about the challenges so well, because you've basically overcome any challenges. You wanted to get into industrial, but you didn't see how you could do more of what did not exist where you were. So did you change your passion? Which I don't even think you can do that, but did you change your passion? No, you went global with it. I mean, there is no limit to what we can do when we put our minds to it, especially if you come from that passionate place, like you said, because that's what makes us happy, and happiness makes us do things, right? And when you're not happy, you won't do those things. But I also liked how you said you had this list of CCIMs that you could tap into because of now your involvement and your, you know, your part in CCIM. And Jim had a question there. We're on our last 30 seconds of the session, and now it's time for questions. Jim had one in the chat that kind of alluded to that while you were actually talking, and sharing basically how giving to CCIM also has helped you, right? And giving back to you. You've kind of touched on that a little bit, but if you could expound a little more, like, you've got access to these names, okay, but then now what?
Yeah. So I think the really important part about networking is that it doesn't happen overnight. And this is both relevant at the chapter level and at the institute level when you come to the national meetings and so forth, is that, you know, you can't expect to show up for, let's say you're doing a breakfast or a lunch or something as a chapter. You have a speaker there. You can't expect to show up, tuck yourself in the back of the room, sit down, listen to the speaker, leave, and then feel like, oh, I'm not getting any business out of this. Really? Shocker. Because nobody knows who you are. Just because you're wearing a name badge doesn't mean they know who you are. I just realized my pin's not in the picture, but I do have it on, just so you know, I always wear it. And so you know, networking is an action, right? You have to engage, and you it helps to get really attuned to making the most of your time, because you can swing to, you can go from like showing up and being a wallflower and really not getting anything out of that networking session. And then you can go to the other side where you show up at every event and you network and you talk to 1,000 different people, and you get nothing out of that because you're so surface, right? Every time I go into a meeting, whether it's a CCIM meeting or I do crew and some other like local, you know, economic development things, before I walk through that door, really actually before I get out of my car, I sit and I think, what am I trying to accomplish here? Okay, what is the point of me coming to this event? And, you know, relevant to whatever the event is, I make some sort of kind of mental plan about what it is I'm trying to do. I would like to meet 2 people who do X or Y, depending on what the meeting is. And I have, you know, it's nothing formal. It's just going in with the right thought process about why I'm here. Because if you don't know why you're there, don't waste your time or money being there, right? Go back to the office and do something else. But so I will go in and then I focus on trying to meet those 1 or 2 people. I try to have, you know, an idea of, yeah, what I'm going to try and take away from that. And then equally as important is it's very easy to get caught into a conversation and you kind of recognize this isn't really like, I hate to say this because it kind of sounds bad, but you're like, this really isn't why I'm here. Like, this is not a person that I need to network with. You know, it's like the roof guy or something, you know, because he does roofing services, and you're like, yeah, this isn't the highest and best use of my time. And so, you know, practicing ways to exit gracefully out of a conversation. Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me, I need to just go chat with this person real quick, or bringing someone else into the conversation. Hey, have you met, you know, Sean? And then, you know, you kind of exit gracefully from that. And then you apologize to Sean later for like, sorry about that. Thanks for saving me. But you have to do that because your time is precious. And I don't think any of us want to spend all of our time doing this job, no matter how passionate you are about it, right? Like, I love being able to get home in time to walk my dog before it gets dark. And I love being able to spend time with my husband. And I love to, you know, be able to talk to my kids on the phone and, you know, that kind of thing, because they all live in different spots now. But, you know, those are the things. So when I really think about that, and I think about, you know, I need to get these two objectives done for this networking meeting, then I can stay focused on that and I come out of that. Doesn't mean every time it's perfect. And sometimes I walk away from a meeting and I'm like, oh, I totally tanked on that. You know, and sometimes just like, I don't know, you're not feeling very networky, right? So you just kind of get through it and you're like, I'll do better next time. So, you know, you don't beat yourself up over it, but going in there with that idea and then coming back when you're done and making those notes, right? Like, I love knowing, I love the reaction I get from clients and even people that are like in my network. When I remember something about them that they're like, you know, oh my God, did I even tell you that? And you're like, yeah, you did. You know, things like their favorite football team, and then noticing that their team won, and then just sending them a quick text like, oh my God, the Niners killed it. Woo! You know, I'm like, I don't care. But and so, you know, I guess I should have said the Bears. Sorry, that was bad context. Niners are my husband's favorite team. Anyway, so, you know, just those little things. So coming back and making notes, and some people are like, oh, do you use a, you know, certain client management system? And I'm like, no, I don't. I use this really random combination of like my contacts, my calendar, and I use Google Keep, and I just have my method. It doesn't matter what your method is, right? Just use it. That's the important part, is just being consistent with it. So I come back, I make my notes. Yeah, you know, Bears fan. Oh, you know, whatever. Oh, there's Bear down, right? And so that's the so doing that is how you then generate the thing. Because I always, in the back of my mind with networking, people do business they know, like, and trust. It's that simple. Know, like, and trust. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And why do they trust you? Is because they can count on you. They called you, you returned their call, you answered their question, you helped them out, right? So you deal with all of those things. They like you because you remember that they're, you know, you're a Bears fan or whatever. And then, you know, they've gotten to know you because you're showing up to the meetings consistently and, you know, reintroducing yourself if you need to, like trying it. I always, even if I think somebody remembers me, I will always go up and say my name. You know, they're like, oh yeah, I know who you are, you know. And then when people do that for me and I say, oh yeah, I know who you are, I'm like, I didn't remember who they were, but I'm so grateful they told me their name again. And so, you know, it's just, and so what have you done? You've made them feel comfortable, right? They're going to remember you. They're going to know you. They're, you know, and they're not going to want to forget next time, because they're like, oh my God, she's going to come up to me again. I really want to try and remember her name. So know, like, and trust. I always keep that in mind. Be prepared for your networking. You know, follow up in whatever method that works for you, and then just being consistent about it. And so, you know, and then recognizing when you're doing something, you're attending, you know, you're part of a group, and you're like, I'm really not getting anything out of this. Like, I have a few people I like to visit with, but we really don't even talk business. And, you know, I kind of need to drop this. Like, it's so easy, like literally we could network 24/7 with all the different events and conferences and, you know, things that happen in our industry. So you've got to start getting selective about it, and be selective and give it a chance, right? So like say, okay, I'm going to join, you know, NAIOP as an example. It's a good industrial organization. and you join it for a year. And at the end of that year, evaluate it and feel like, oh yeah, you know what? I got, maybe I didn't get, be fair about your evaluation. You don't have to say, oh, I got business out of it. Maybe you didn't get business, but you are feeling like, oh, people know who I am. People are asking me questions about something that's related. So they're starting to think that maybe I can be trusted with, knowledge and providing information and so forth. And then you go, yeah, I'm going to re-up on that. But don't try and do, maybe there's some, like CCIM obviously is my formal commitment. You've got to kind of figure out if you're an industrial like SIOR, NAIOP, some of those, try and fill that in and figure out where it works for you. NAI is another networking source. So I kind of have my evaluation of like what I'm committed to with each of those and making sure that I'm not overly saturated, because otherwise all you're doing is networking and you're not getting any business done.
Those are all some amazing tips, amazing tips. And she mentioned a couple of organizations in there, NAIOP, CREW, NAI. So jot those down if you haven't. We have another question. We've got about 6 minutes left. We got a question from Onea. Onea, I can read it, or you can pop on yourself and speak to Miss Edmonds yourself.
Hi, Andie. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. So I'm coming into the business pretty green, and my question was from a financial perspective, entering into the CCIM world or commercial in itself. What did you do to prepare yourself for that transition? And especially, making it to your first deal, and then also after that, what was like your game plan that you followed?
Yeah. So, and I was kind of looking at the question that was in here. And so is your focus kind of on like the fact that it is such an inconsistent cash flow in terms of being in brokerage and trying to manage that and how to survive and invest in your business? And
Correct, especially if you're going to go into it 100%.
Yeah. So, first of all, I'm going to make the disclaimer. I was really fortunate in that I came from staying at home with my kids, and I had a husband who worked, to going into a job where I knew there wasn't going to be a paycheck right away, but that didn't look any different than the month before because I was at home with my kids, right? So I always like to make that disclaimer. I don't want to come in here and be like, oh, just invest in, in your business and you'll be fine. Like I've got a fortunate, I had a fortunate scenario in which I came into the business. So I recognize that. However, there is, I think that the success that I experienced and the parts that I would replicate or suggest replicating, because there were some things I did wrong, but the few things that I did right was really tracking your pipeline. Okay, so in other words, like, where are you in your deals, and being very conservative on your estimates in terms of how quickly something will close and how likely it is to close. When you're starting out, it does two things. It keeps you accountable and it gives you a reality check, right? So there is like, no, there's not going to be a check coming next month because there is no way that any of these deals that I have going are going to close. And it's a reality of commercial real estate, right? This isn't residential real estate where you can, pop a deal and be done in some cases inside of 30 days and have a check, right? And we generally don't have the same volume as residential brokers have. So there is really a preparation to it. But I think step one is to have your system for tracking and the accountability of it, to remind yourself every day, nope, I got to pick up that phone one more time today because the pipeline's looking a little shallow, and managing that in whatever way is most motivating for you. Then it is really about it's cash flow, right? So it's trying to figure out, okay, if I'm gonna start a business, no matter what the business is, I should be able to come into it with some X amount of dollars. Now, those dollars might come from a savings account. It might come from, I'm just going to suck it up and I'm going to pull X amount of dollars off my credit card, or which is not ideal. I'm not really recommending that, but you got to do what you got to do. or, you know, a home equity line of credit or whatever, to have something that you can try to do to say, this is the amount that I'm starting with. And this has got to last me through, you know, I would say ideally, like if you can figure out a way to come up with enough cash flow and cut expenses enough for 12 months, that gives you a really good runway to start to get some deals done. Now you can do some leases pretty quickly, you know, those can start to come through pretty quickly. You know, so you got to be realistic. Like, I think there's kind of a layering, right? Like you kind of have when you have the opportunity to grab a hit it out of the park type of deal, like a big, you know, a big listing that's maybe a $5 million listing, but realistically, you know that it's going to take X amount of, you know, a full year before it gets sold. Or land listings are another example. Like I had a land listing that literally was in contract, finally closed after 22 months, right? Like, Lord have mercy. But, you know, so you've got to kind of be able to like push those out and figure out where those are going. And then try and figure out upfront, this is the amount of money that I'm working with, and these are the things that I'm going to cut, and I'm, you know, going to make coffee at home or get it from the office, or, you know, whatever it is. But there were some things that, as I found that I was starting to have to spend some money on my business to get to do some things above and beyond what my company provided for me, you know, that's where I came up with this idea that, okay, I'm going to set this amount of money aside. And if I run out of this and I haven't done a deal and I haven't been able to get something to close, then maybe I'm going to have to reevaluate what I'm doing. But having that set up in that plan and trying to ideally figure out a way to survive for a year is, I think, the best way to go about it, because and then it's a really regular reminder about, this is what I'm doing, this is how long I have, and this is how I am going to get there. So I would caution not to say, to give yourself too much of a sense of like a ticking clock, because that'll make you kind of get in that panic desperation mode, and you know, people feel that and you don't want to have that. But that confidence of like, I know between now and 12 months from now, I'm going to be able to do enough deals that will allow me to continue on into the future. And then again, as you bring in those deals and you get those checks, trying to continue to chunk away a little, just even if you say 10% of every commission check that I get, so the net amount to you, and I take another 10% off of there, and you put it in your, you know, rainy day fund or whatever you want to call it, because, you know, 2007, 8, and 9 will happen again at some point, right? To have that sitting over there. What helped me with that was as I built that up a little bit, I got the opportunity to do a little bit of what I'll call elephant hunting. So working with this guy on these big deals, when you're doing things that are, you know, 20, 30, $40 million, those checks really get spread out, but they're real big when they come in, right? So really being committed to saying, yeah, I'm going to, you know, pay off this little bit of credit card debt I incurred because it was, you know, took a little longer or whatever, you get that paid off, but I'm also going to commit to putting some money over here so I can go another 6 months without a paycheck. And hopefully that paycheck in 6 months is, you know, a 6-figure paycheck, right? Like,
thank you.
Check.
Thank you so
Does that
much.
help? I hope it helped.
Yes, thank you.
I don't think there's anything you've said today that has not helped. Let me just say that. I've heard consistency, I've heard exposure, I've heard discipline, I've heard confidence, I've heard all of these things that hopefully has inspired everyone today to actually move forward in their mission of being a phenomenal commercial real estate practitioner. I want to respect everyone's time. We're 2 minutes after the hour. Feel free to stay on afterwards, but we are grateful once again, Andie, for your presence here with us today, for answering our questions. If we have any further questions from anyone, we can certainly shoot those over to you so that you can assist them with those answers, with all of this information. Can I ask you one last thing?
Of course.
What are you reading right now? What is it that you're reading?
So right now I just So I'm very committed to putting books down when I don't like them and they're not inspiring to me. So I started one, and I'm not gonna say what it was because I put it down, I didn't like it. I'm gonna tell you what my 2 favorite books are of all time, and that I recommend them to everybody. Actually, I'm gonna give you 3. One is, first and foremost, Start With Why by Simon Sinek.
Mhm.
It is the best way to get really clear about what you're doing. Second is Essentialism by Greg McKeown. I love that book. It's basically learn to say no a lot, and know why you're saying no and feel good about it. And then the final one is Delivering Happiness. And it's the guy who founded Zappos, whose name is completely escaping me right now. But it just talks about, it was sort of the foundation for the culture of the brokerage firm that I started, in that it's just really taking care of people, and how he did it, and how he, they were basically about to get evicted, and they, were out of money and couldn't make payroll, and he, figured it out and bootstrapped it. And now, Zappos is, and this was obviously kind of, a few years ago when Zappos was really hitting it out of the ballpark, kind of early on internet stuff. But just his attitude was very inspiring to me. So that's another good one.
Awesome. I put his name in the chat. I'm probably gonna muck it up, but Nick Swarnmore.
Is that
He and
right?
2 other guys, Nick Swarnmore, Tony Heish, and Alfred Lynn.
Is that it? I don't think that's it.
For Zappos, so he founded it in 1999.
Yeah, Delivering, I'm going to tell you, Happiness. Oops. Tony Hsieh, that's who wrote the book, and that was who the founder was. And I think he passed. Why do I think he maybe passed away? I don't remember. But it's Tonyhsieh.
Oh, so I said Heish. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you did say, okay, yeah. I
No
knew
worries.
it didn't sound right, but yeah, Shay. So that's
Perfect.
yeah.
So we've got Delivering Happiness, Essentialism, and Start With Why. You've got your assignment. Get to reading.
Yeah.
Follow up. Our next CCIM chat is happening December 19th with Candace Presley, CCIM.
Oh my gosh, you got Candace?
Yes, we did.
Oh,
Isn't she
tell her I
lovely?
said hi. I love her. She is
Will do.
a bundle of happiness. I love her so much.
If you're able to hop on, please do for a moment and say hello, but I will certainly pass it along.
Yeah. And then if any of you want to reach out to me, please do. Sean, feel free to just share my contact info. I'm happy to, talk with people, or, expand on the conversation that we had today. And then if there's anything just in terms of anybody who's pursuing their PIN, if you need some thoughts about that or whatever, don't forget about the scholarships. You guys know about the foundation scholarships, right? So those are available. Yeah, so whatever we can do. Site to Do Business, I always got to give a plug for CCIM Technology. Site to Do Business, stdb.com. And it's got all the great Esri GIS, Business Analyst, Database USA. You have to be a member of CCIM Institute in order to have access to that. So if you're a designee, you've got it. Otherwise, you need to be a candidate, paying your national dues. But it's really excellent. So that's my last little, as FVP, I got to say my little CCIM parts.
And these mentees are no stranger to that information. They have a guidebook, a handbook that they received at the beginning of their program with all of those details. So it's great to hear it being echoed, from the first VP at the National Institute. That means we're doing something right. So that's fantastic.
You are 100%. You guys, and I hope you'll share this process and what you're doing at the next chapter officer training next summer, because it's really good, and it's easy to put together. And I know it takes your time, but it's just such a great way to engage. So yeah, share it as a best practice. It's really good.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That sounds amazing. Well, thank you again, Andie. I really hate that we took 7 more minutes of your time, but thank you for being so gracious and continuing to share and pour into the mentees.
Yeah, no problem at all. Good luck, everyone.